Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the NF Hope Concerts, the live interviews. I am Jeff Lebo. I am not only your host, but I'm co-founder of the NF Hope Concerts. The NF Hope Concerts were actually created by my wife and I after our daughter Emma was born with the neurological disorder neurofibromatosis. We wanted to draw from the world that we knew, that of arts and music and theater, and put together an event that not only came from something we love, but to help the person we love most, and also the tens of thousands of others living with neurofibromatosis. Back in May, we had our first live, or virtual, I should say, live stream concert, thanks to COVID-19. But it came to our attention that there are a lot of artists out there who are incredibly generous and obviously talented, who wanted to contribute their time to help this cause and just be a part of this event. And it was a great opportunity for us to also expose the world and the fans of the NF Hope concert to so much more talent than normally ends up on our stage for the live events. So I'm going to dive into episode 7. If, by the way, you are so inclined, you would like to continue making a contribution, the NF Hope Concerts have a goal this year of exceeding $1 million raised for the cause and for Neurofibromatosis Network, an amazing organization that helps people living with NF. You can see the link at the bottom. I'll point to it. It's always opposite of what I think. Go to nfnetwork.org and you can make a contribution of any size there. If you have any questions, of course, go to nfnetwork.org. If you have questions, go to nfhope.org or make comments right here on YouTube and Facebook, and I'll be happy to get back to you. All right, so now to the real star of the afternoon. We are so excited to have our guest today, Anthony McGill. Now, instead of trying to fumble around my own gushing for him, I'm actually going to read a bit of his bio to introduce him. Clarinetist Anthony McGill is one of classical music's most recognizable and brilliantly multifaceted figures. He serves as the principal clarinet of the New York Philharmonic, that orchestra's first African-American principal player, and maintains a dynamic international solo and chamber music career. Hailed for his trademark brilliance, penetrating sound, and rich character, as said by the New York Times, as well as for the exquisite combination of technical refinement and expressive radiance, said by the Baltimore Sun, McGill also serves as an ardent advocate for helping music education reach underserved communities and for addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in classical music. At just 40 years old, he has had an amazing career and some awe-inspiring accomplishments. Before even graduating college, McGill was appointed as Associate Principal Clarinet of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. For a decade, he served as Principal Clarinet of the Metropolitan Opera. He has appeared as a soloist with some of the nation's most renowned orchestras, New York Philharmonic, Baltimore Symphony, San Diego Symphony, and Kansas City Symphony. He's played with some of the most highly regarded quartets and chamber groups in the world. And the one that gets me most, despite all of his amazing accomplishments, is playing alongside violinist Itzhak Perlman, cellist Yo-Yo Ma, and pianist Gabriela Montero at the inauguration for President Barack Obama in 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Anthony McGill. Anthony, welcome.
Hey, Jeff. Good to see you.
Was that an embarrassing enough introduction for you?
Yeah, that was. Good thing I was backstage for that part.
Well, I mean, I have to say that I'm definitely a fan, and we'll talk a little bit more about just what makes me a fan in a little bit. But let's go ahead and dive right in. You actually come from kind of a musical family, both you and your brother Tamar, who's the principal flautist for the Seattle Symphony. You both hold principal positions at major orchestras. Where did you and your brother get your musical inspiration?
Yeah, we grew up in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. And, my older brother, Damari started when I was about 3 years old. And he started playing the flute and really just like fell in love with the instrument, the sound of the instrument, and just playing it. And my parents were both artists and art teachers when they met, and they were lovers of music as well. So they would get together in the 60s and play drums and play flutes and sing and dance and have fun. And my mom bought my dad a flute. So that's how he started with the flute that was laying around the house. And I just really just wanted to be just like my older brother. Still do to this day. So, I picked up the clarinet, and because I think my folks used to listen to a lot of smooth jazz in the house. So, there was Kenny G wafting through the speakers and all kinds of folks. And so clarinet was kind of similar to that. I wanted to play sax. So that's how we got started. And, I really just fell in love with it, a few years in. So that's the beginning, the early years.
Well, that's so clearly we see where your brother got the inspiration. Your brother got the inspiration from the flute and the drums that were out that your parents were playing. You got yours from Kenny G floating through the house. If it makes your brother feel any better, I actually played flute for a while until I realized that being the only guy in the flute section didn't necessarily mean I get to date the girls in the flute section. So I picked up the oboe instead. How old were you when you actually started playing clarinet?
Yeah, I was 9, and I was like a really nerdy kid, and there was a band at my school, and of course, that's what I did. I just I did lots of other things too, sports and what have you, but the music thing was the thing that we just kind of like latched onto.
I mean, it takes a lot of work to master anything. But to the level that you have mastered it, what was it that drove you to get so good at it, to make it sort of a permanent fixture in your life?
Right. I remember once when I was a kid, I was at a music program called the Merit School of Music, and it was a community music program, started to help inner city kids get access to music education. And I think it was a tuition-free program at the time. And this guy, a professional musician of some sort, I don't know who he was, but he came and he said, look, music is really hard. If you can imagine yourself doing anything else in life, do that, because it's really, really challenging. It's a really challenging profession. And I remembered that. So, I was going to summer camps, and I just loved being around people that were into music. And I just loved the community of musicians, even when we were young kids, And at some point I just realized, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. There's nothing else I can imagine myself doing. And I had lots of interests before that, but from this moment on, it was probably being on stage, getting chills, playing some big piece with my youth orchestra at the time. And I was just like, this is it. There's nothing else. It's inside of me now. And that's it. You don't really go into music to make lots of money or anything like that. So it was kind of a vocation.
That's I played oboe. I told you this before we got on, that I played it for 16 years, and my big dream, the thing you sort of quietly picture yourself doing in your head and don't admit because it's a little embarrassing if you told anybody else, of getting the phone call that I got the principal oboe position at the New York Philharmonic. So the young nerd high school musician in me has just got to ask, what was it like, that process of landing that? Now, you had already played in Cincinnati, you played in the Metropolitan Opera, but to get that position, especially considering what it meant, what was that experience like?
Well, that one was a really wild experience, because I frankly had been trying to get into the New York Philharmonic for a very long time as well, like many people. And so from the time I was like 20 years old, or pretty young, I even applied, and my resume was rejected for an audition for a different job. And, from there, you go like 15, 16 years later and audition again and still don't get it. And you're passed over. And then when you get that opportunity, you get that call, and they say, this is, you are being offered this job. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the hard thing about orchestras, though, is that once you're offered the job, then it's like a whole 2 or 3 year process before you're guaranteed that position that you're playing.
Really?
So yeah, so it's like you're offered that opportunity, and then the work like beyond that starts to happen, and the pressure, playing the concerts and proving yourself year after year, that's like an ongoing process. And so it was really like both like exhilarating and satisfying to be offered that position, but then like completely frightening and scary at the same time, So.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly you have proven yourself many, many times over at this point. and I listed all of your accomplishments ahead of time, but not only did you get the honor of playing at the inauguration of Barack Obama in 2009, but you actually premiered a new piece by John Williams. There's no pressure there. And you were sitting next to Itzhak Perlman and Yo Ma and Gabriela Montero. Like, first of all, what is that process of getting asked to be a part of the inauguration? And then what was that day like?
Oh, that was unbelievable. Like, actually, talk about getting a call out of the blue. That a call happened in December before that, the inauguration, and that was by a manager of Yo-Yo's, and she called and said, "You want to do this concert?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do a concert with Yo-Yo." I had played with him before, and she gave me the details. She was like, "Well, it's for the inauguration of Barack Obama at the inauguration." And I was like, "What?" Like, I was like, that can't be, I mean, it was so historic already. You can't imagine that it's going to happen. You're excited. People are already trying to figure out how they're going to get there to go to it. And then you get invited to play. So that's kind of how that happened. And, that day was just unbelievable because it just felt surreal. First of all, we were outside, I think, at the Capitol, and for like hours, freezing, but we're up above the entire mall, facing
Right.
out to all the people. And, where the everyone's going to talk from. It's right down in front of you. So you have a front row seat to history being made. And then you turn around and you see Yo-Yo Ma, and you see Itzhak and Gabriela, and you're all out there freezing, and you can't feel anything anyway. So I mean, that was just, I'll never ever forget it, and it was a life-changing event. And
incredible.
Yeah,
truly incredible. You actually you and Titus Underwood got to do something really cool. You and a bunch of actually other top classical musicians out there got together and did Fred O. And I'm only saying Fred O because I know he goes by that, and I'm not going to try to butcher his last name. Fred O's arrangement of Lift Your Voice Up and Sing. How did that come about? Was Titus the producer there? I mean, how did you get a part of that, and what did that mean, especially right now?
Yeah, Titus Underwood and my brother and all kinds of other folks that have really prominent positions, all African-American musician, wind players, did this arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing. And Titus emailed everybody. Like, this was a few months ago. And he's like, look, everybody, I want to do this to lift us up in the, during the COVID crisis, and unite, and a show of positivity and beauty of music and possibility. Because Titus is the first principal oboist in the country that happens to be African American, and in the history of orchestras in America. And that is such a great accomplishment, as well as others. And he got everybody to kind of record their parts. He asked for the arrangement, told us what to do, and we got them in separately, and they did all the production and editing. And one of our friends, I think Anthony out in LA, was very good at the editing and producing of it, and they put these beautiful images next to it, and it was just a really beautiful project to be a part of. We're like all thirsting for meaning, in this time, and as performers, as musicians and artists.
Right. And even though, there's always a question I ask everybody is, what are you doing during COVID? But I think you've proven, between the Lift Up Your Voice and Sing, which is interesting, the timing of its release made it even more powerful than it was probably initially intended to be. But then you also created your own. And we'll talk a little bit about it, but I've touted it, I've shared it. We have friends and Facebook groups that have shared it. But I'm going to play your version of America the Beautiful, and when we come back, we can talk a little bit about it. Wow, it gets me every time. I've watched it more times than I can count at this point. Why did you choose that song? Why was that song the voice that you wanted to share musically?
You know, it's really interesting whenever I watch that too, because I've seen it a few times, that it takes me back to the day that I woke up and decided to make a statement. So I wrote something out. Like that morning, I woke up at 5 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I just took out my phone and just started taking some notes about the state of the world and what was going on. And you know, America the Beautiful was suggested by my wife to play, and I knew I wanted to use my clarinet as well as just my words or my voice, because this is the way I communicate with the world every day. You know, and I've missed that. So this was like kind of a chance to do that. And, you know, it became what you saw because I was playing it, and, you know, I've never really played America the Beautiful on my clarinet before. So I was playing around with it, seeing if I could, you know, just get the melody out, and like played a wrong note. And I was like, oh, you know what? I can make this part minor, because I was listening to the words as I was playing the tune. And I was like, this is what I'm trying to say about how we can do better, you know, that, you know, racial injustice is something that, you know, America has not figured out. America has not, is not quite beautiful from sea to shining sea yet. And so what I was saying through the music and through that performance and through how sad in a way that piece became that day for me while trying to do this piece, trying to make this statement that, yes, America is beautiful, but how beautiful is it? You know, if we don't live up to the ideals that we all believe in, you know, of equality and racial equality and justice for all. And so that's kind of what you heard through that performance, is that I was trying to convey that emotion, that the beauty is alongside the struggle. You know, it's alongside the struggle for Black people in this country and oppressed people around the world. And so I wanted to kind of unite us by saying, you know, let's do this. Let's take two knees. Let's take two knees for justice together and try to improve what we know of as the beauty of our nation, you know, but we need to do that for everybody in order for us to be truly beautiful.
Absolutely. Agreed. I when you look at it, you kind of see the Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. You change that, but you've not only taken 2 knees, you've actually made a conscious choice, it seems, to put your hands behind your back, and it's almost reminiscent of an arrest. Was that on purpose?
Jeff, just thinking about that day and what made me do that, I didn't plan that part out, and I knelt down and then I did that, and I actually watched the video, and all of a sudden I knew. I was like, I don't know if it was instinctual because I've seen that so much, on TV. I've seen so many people go through that experience, and with what happened to George Floyd being murdered and Breonna Taylor, still unresolved issues with that, and Elijah McClain and all these people. And there's so many different people. It's not just within the last couple of months that I don't know, that I've never known, that this feeling of, or the vision or the sight of someone kneeling, there are a couple different things. I wanted to take 2 knees because supposedly 1 knee wasn't enough. And that's what Colin Kaepernick did. And he gave up his career for this peaceful protest that people shunned, and turned their backs on. So I wanted to take 2 knees to try again, to like a variation on a theme, if you will. And while doing that, when I went down on my knees, that's just what happened, and I saw it and I was like, yeah, there are so many different moments. And then there's that head being bowed. And, so many people over time have prayed for justice for so many people, especially in the Black community, prayer being such an important part of our community. And then also a really important part that you can't ignore is the fact that, that justice is unequal in our country. And so me as a Black man in my living room, taking 2 knees and putting my hands behind my back definitely has dual meaning.
Right. Now you said it here too, you there's a quote about you saying, if it's not beautiful for everyone, it's not beautiful from sea to shining sea. There's the meaning of that, but what changes would you like to see that you think would make it beautiful for everyone? Is it just equality? What do you see?
Right. I think the amount of fairness in the justice system, for instance, being one of them. So, one fundraiser I did recently, I'm in the process of as well, is to give money to the Equal Justice Initiative. So the work they do for the cause through the legal system to make convictions more equal, no matter who you are. So the work they do to educate people about the history of what we saw and witnessed the other month is kind of like public lynching, the history of that in our country. The equal access to opportunity, equal access to work and to all levels of society, that we've not arrived there yet. We've not arrived to the promised land.
Right.
And so I think just awareness about that, fairness regarding policing, considering how policing is done in neighborhoods that are impoverished and brown and Black is different from policing that's done in neighborhoods with high taxes and that sort of thing. And, just considering all of these different avenues for fairness for all people. And that's just, we could talk about that for a very long time, but
yes,
those are just a couple of the points that we need to figure out in this country.
I totally agree. These are the things that need to be done, but you have a unique voice, obviously. I'm going to take a step back away from your video and talk about your friend Titus again. So, you and Titus share, in a way, a title. There was that video that you shared about him being the first African-American principal oboist in any major symphony, and you said it during an interview too, and you share that title of first as well. And I had an interesting conversation with a good friend of mine who is African-American as well about, interesting and creative ways to define white privilege as a way to help people understand, what needs to change. So I'm curious, does the weight of that word first sometimes overweigh the music or overshadow the music? Or do you find that it's really your source of inspiration?
That's a really great question. And what's interesting about it? There are folks that I've seen say this to me and see it online, and they say it's shameful that we have to say that every single time. And actually, in a way, they're right. Because that actually demonstrates the way society was built, which is a white-centered society, and in orchestras as well. And this whole concept of white supremacy, so creates the atmosphere and the culture of that being the case, which is that there are a few of us who are the first Black principal of our orchestra in maybe hundreds of years, right? Orchestras have been around a really long time. So that's just the state of the world. And so on the one hand, you have that, right? And then on the other hand, you also have the responsibility of actually being the representative of your race and a representative of your community on a stage. And so that actually has it actually creates a different responsibility. So your responsibility is not to just be someone's first, as in you won an award, and that's great, and you have a medal on your shirt that says that. But actually, the responsibility comes in because you actually have to represent and show the next generation that you are doing this, and you can be proud of yourself for doing it. And you also can be the first or the second or the fifth or the 50th member of any major symphony orchestra, or a classical musician in general, or maybe just a musician at all. And so that responsibility supersedes the other for me, because the other focuses on the racism in America and the racist society and the world we live in. But the other focuses on what my responsibility is to be that representative for those that see me and want to do what I do. And so a little boy, a little girl who wants to play music will see that PBS special with me on the screen and want to do that and say, Mommy, I want to do that. And I can, because I've seen this person and that person and that first and that first and that second do it. So I don't focus on it, but others do. And so it's important to separate those two concepts.
So then one last question. I mean, you sit on the board of directors for the League of American Orchestras, and you really have, become a champion and a supporter of making sure the underserved communities have access to this, to sort of be able to see that. So if you could change just one thing about our nation's orchestras, being in that, having that perspective, what would it be?
Well, just one thing is difficult.
How about a category?
I would say that, honestly, if I could just, if I could snap my fingers, orchestras wouldn't be so out of sync with the way society looks and feels. And that an orchestra, if an orchestra is a microcosm of what our communities are, what our world is, what our cities are, and they're nonprofits, they're supposed to represent the values of those communities and the values of those cities, then we would look more representatively like those places that we play. And I really do think that I'm talking about diversity coupled with the concept that if you actually are more representative of your communities, you will be better. You will play music better, more beautifully, more with more variety and with more pleasure even. And then there would be more people that would appreciate it from many different walks of life.
Right.
And many people would be able to experience the joy and the beauty of that music that we all love and hold dear. So that would be the one thing. But obviously, there are many things that we could discuss for the next few hours,
right,
that would enable that. But that's the dream.
Well, yeah. When PBS picks up my podcast and I've got 2 hours on my hand, I'll have you back.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, all right. I just want to make sure that if anybody wants to get any more information or learn about you, here are your links to your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can get all this on anthonymcgill.com. And of course, if you want to be inspired, like so many incredible artists have out in not only the music world, but also dance, just click on that link. Go to Take Two Knees and take a look at some of the incredible performances that have been inspired by Anthony's work, by your work. Thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure. I understand it's your birthday tomorrow, so happy birthday.
It is.
I just had mine last week.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's truly been an honor to have you on, and I look forward to having a couple of hours to sit down with you at some point, if not just to geek out about music.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Jeff. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Absolutely. You have a great day. We'll end now. Thanks, everybody.